Stop pretending you can afford this, Nathaniel. My father's voice hit me like a punch, loud, sharp, and honed with that familiar edge of public humiliation. It echoed across the polished marble lobby of the Riverside Grand Tower, a cavern of glass and steel in downtown Chicago. The sound bounced off the soaring walls and crystal chandeliers as if he'd paid for the acoustics himself, ensuring the whole world could hear. Heads turned. The realtor, a crisp young man in a tailored suit, froze with his clipboard held halfway to his chest. The concierge, previously a statue of professional indifference, now watched with undisguised curiosity. Even a young couple waiting for the elevator, wrapped up in their own world a moment before, stopped to stare. That was his power. My father, Gregory Black, didn't need to raise his voice to command a room. He could turn an ordinary sentence into a public execution. A cold knot formed in my stomach, pulling tight, but I kept my face a mask of calm. I'd trained for this moment my entire life without realizing it. The unnatural stillness that comes after years of being the family's designated disappointment. "Dad, please," I started, my voice lower than I intended. Before I could finish, my sister Haley cut in with a laugh that stung worse than his words. It was light, airy, and utterly dismissive. "Oh, come on, Nathaniel," she said, her voice dripping with a mock sympathy that was her specialty. "You're still driving that old Ford, right? The one that sounds like it's gargling gravel? Why are we even wasting this poor guy's time?" She gestured toward the realtor, who now held his clipboard like a shield. His polite smile faltered as his eyes darted between us, clearly unsure whether to intervene or try to merge with the potted ficus behind him. I could feel the heat rising in my chest, a familiar burn I'd learned to swallow. This was nothing new. This was their duet. Dad always knew how to make me feel small, especially in public. It wasn't enough for him to be right. He had to be witnessed being right, his judgment validated by the averted eyes of strangers. Every insult from my childhood flickered through my head like a slideshow from a broken projector. "You'll never have the discipline for success, Nate. You quit too easily. It's a character flaw. Why can't you just be more like your sister, Haley, the golden one?" The Ivy League graduate who'd slotted seamlessly into a top-tier law firm, her life a perfect reflection of our father's ambitions. She was the real success of the Black family. Meanwhile, I was the dreamer who wasted potential, the sensitive one who chased impossible ideas instead of a secure career path. But this time was different. This time I had come prepared. "Actually," I said, my voice even cutting through the tension, "I can afford it." Dad's laugh was short, a cruel bark of disbelief. "Oh, really? With what? The tips from that bar job you had? Don't embarrass yourself, son." His gaze swept over my simple dark sweater and jeans as if they were rags. "Some people accept the reality of their balance sheet, Nathaniel. It's time you learned to." The words cut deep the way they always did. But something in me had finally calcified. I wasn't that broke, desperate kid anymore, begging for a scrap of his approval. I had spent years forging a new version of myself in silence and obscurity. So instead of shrinking, I smiled. A small, quiet smile that was entirely my own. "Funny thing, Dad," I said. "I stopped believing in assigned places a long time ago." Haley groaned dramatically. "Oh, here we go. Another one of Nathaniel's profound life speeches. Can we leave now? I have dinner reservations with people who actually make six figures." Before I could respond, the realtor cleared his throat, stepping forward with an unexpected, almost theatrical timing. "Mr. Black," he said, his professional composure restored. He looked directly at me, pointedly ignoring my father. "Your penthouse is ready for viewing. Shall I show them that first? Or would you prefer we start with your second property over on Lakeshore Drive?" The silence that followed was absolute, a vacuum that sucked the air from the lobby. Haley froze mid-eye roll, her mouth slightly agape. My father's expression shifted from smug certainty to utter confusion. His jaw worked, but no sound came out. The carefully constructed world where he was the king and I was the court jester had just been shattered by a single, polite question. The word "you're" hung in the air like thunder. I let it linger for a long moment before I answered. "The penthouse," I said calmly. "It's more private." The elevator dinged, its golden doors sliding open with a whisper. I caught my reflection in the mirrored walls. Not the struggling, uncertain kid they thought they knew, but a man who had finally, painstakingly, stepped into his own story. "Coming?" I asked, keeping my tone light. Haley hesitated, her perfect poise gone. Dad clenched his jaw, his mind scrambling for the right insult, the right dismissal, and for the first time, finding none. They followed me in silence. As the elevator doors closed, sealing us in a box of gold and glass, the reflection of their shocked faces faded away. For the first time in my life, I wasn't walking behind them. I was walking ahead. I wasn't born with a silver spoon. I was born with a stopwatch. My father timed everything when I was a kid. How fast I solved math drills, how long it took to mow the lawn, how many minutes I spent staring out the window doing nothing. Life, he said, was a race that rewarded people who moved on schedule. I learned early that his schedule had no room for my kind of dreams. My mom, Elena, was the soft place in our hard, ruthlessly efficient house. She was the one who let me take apart the old desktop computer in the basement and didn't scold me when I cracked the case trying to make it better. She'd bring me a grilled cheese sandwich and a Coke, sit on the dusty floor beside me, and say, "If you break it, you'll learn how to fix it." She believed in the long way around. Dad believed in the right way, his way. When Mom got sick my senior year, our home grew quiet. The stopwatch clicks and hurried footsteps were replaced by a heavy stillness. After she passed, Dad filled the silence with standards. He pushed Haley toward law school, a path as straight and unforgiving as a Roman road, and tried to push me into his accounting firm. "Numbers don't lie, Nate," he'd say. Maybe not, but they didn't sing either. I wanted to build something that made life easier for people who didn't have time to think about software. People like my mom, who paid bills at the kitchen table after a long day, or the shop owners on the corner who worked 6 days a week and still loved what they did. I followed his plan for a while. I went to a state college, declared business, and took the internship at his firm. I hated every minute of it. I hated the oppressive gray carpet, the smell of the copy machine, the way people said, "close of play," instead of "end of day." I lasted 9 months after graduation. When I told Dad I was quitting to build a small business tool I'd been sketching in notebooks, he didn't argue. He simply closed his checkbook. "Time to learn what the real world feels like," he said, his voice flat. He didn't just shut the door on me that day, he locked it. The real world felt like a tiny studio apartment in Indianapolis with a broken heater and a window that faced a brick wall. It felt like double shifts at Miller's Diner, pouring coffee for third-shift nurses and truckers, my feet aching but my mind buzzing with lines of code. It felt like counting tips in the bathroom because my roommate didn't need to see how tight things were. It felt like buying the cheapest coffee beans at the corner store and telling myself the bitter, burnt taste meant I was awake enough to code until sunrise. I called my idea LedgerLink. I wanted it to connect all the messy parts of running a small shop, inventory, orders, invoices, taxes, into one clean, calm screen. One page that said, "Here's what you have, here's what you owe, and yes, you're going to be okay." I had no seed money. I had a used laptop with a cracked hinge, spotty Wi-Fi from the cafe downstairs, and a plastic folding table I'd found on the curb. I learned to code by watching free tutorials until my eyes burned, breaking things and then, just as my mom predicted, learning how to fix them. My schedule was brutal. Code from 2 in the morning until 7, sleep for 3 hours, and then show up at the diner with a smile that felt stapled on. People laughed at me. A guy I knew from high school, Brandon Hale, told me to stop cosplaying as a founder. A girl I dated for a few months asked when I'd get a real job. Haley once sent a text that said, "You're not the startup type, Nate. This isn't you." She meant it kindly, which somehow hurt more. Then I met Lydia and Marco, who owned a tiny neighborhood market 2 blocks from my apartment. They kept a paper ledger in a shoebox and were drowning in the details. I offered to build something simple for them for free. "If it helps, you keep it," I said. If it doesn't, you throw it away. They shrugged and smiled. What do we have to lose? I built the first version of LedgerLink sitting on my floor because my chair had cracked and I couldn't afford a new one. It was ugly but honest. The day I watched Lydia click, send invoice, and physically exhale with relief, I felt something deep in my chest loosen. When Marco saw the inventory page flag the items that were low, he clapped me on the shoulder like I just pulled his car out of a ditch. Word spread the slow way: a cousin, a neighbor, a friend of a friend. I'd install the software for free, ask them what hurt, fix that, and then ask for $50 a month. Most said yes. Slowly, I scraped together enough to move to a slightly better apartment. I bought a used desk. I kept my shifts at the diner because fear is loud when rent is due. There were low points. Once, a citywide power outage fried my server, and I spent 36 hours straight recovering data, fueled by gas station coffee that tasted like burnt rubber. I cried exactly once, in the walk-in cooler at Miller's, hidden behind a stack of cold lettuce. Then I wiped my face and went back to the floor because people needed refills. Then came the break. A gruff, no-nonsense wholesaler named Mr. Russo, who supplied a dozen of my clients, called me directly. Who built that little thing that makes my clients' orders not a complete disaster? He'd barked into the phone. I told him the truth, me. He wanted a demo on Monday. It was Friday night. I pulled 2 all-nighters, rebuilt the dashboard so it didn't look like it had been designed by a sleep-deprived raccoon, and walked into that meeting in a thrift store blazer, a small coffee stain on the lapel I didn't notice until it was too late. They signed a 6-month pilot program. That pilot turned into real revenue. I hired my first part-time developer, Jess. We cleaned up the code and onboarded the wholesaler's entire partner network. I watched the monthly numbers grow from a few hundred to a few thousand, then to a figure that made my hands shake. When I closed the deal with a private investor, a clean $2 million for a minority stake, I didn't pop champagne. I ordered a pizza, paid my back taxes, upgraded our servers, and bought my team real ergonomic chairs. I also wired $40,000 to Lydia and Marco's Market with a note. For the shoebox that started it all. I didn't call my father or Haley. I didn't post anything online. I just kept working. Chicago came later, the office, then the apartment. I picked the Riverside Grand Tower because I'd walked by it once on a freezing night and told myself, someday, I'll be warm. It wasn't about the marble. It was about no longer shivering. Success doesn't come with a warning label, but it should. The trouble began the moment people started remembering my name. After a feature on a popular small business blog, downloads tripled. My inbox exploded. And somewhere in that crowd of new admirers, trouble waited, dressed like opportunity. Came wearing Brandon Hale's grin. He showed up at my office unannounced, all confidence and perfect hair. "Man, Nate," he said, throwing his arms wide. "Look at you. I always knew you had it in you." No, he didn't, but I let him talk. He wanted to partner. He'd built something called Bookies. We could merge platforms, he said. The idea sounded fine until I saw his pitch deck. The interface looked suspiciously like mine. When I called him out, his smile didn't flicker. Great minds think alike, man. But my gut told me the truth. Someone had leaked my code. Turned out to be Jess. She hadn't meant to sell me out, she said, her voice cracking over the phone. Brandon offered me some freelance consulting work. I shared some old repositories for reference. I didn't think he'd just take it. I believed her, but the damage was done. That's when my father called. I hadn't heard from him in almost a year. He didn't start with hello. "Your sister told me you're running some tech thing," he said. "She says you're making money." "I'm doing okay," I said carefully. "Good, because I need your help." He explained that one of his investment properties had lost a major backer. He needed a bridge loan. "Just a few $100,000, he said, like it was pocket change. "I can't do that, Dad." "You can't or you won't." His voice turned sharp. "Both." He sighed, a sound heavy with disappointment. "You've become arrogant. Money has gone to your head." "No," I said quietly. "Money just gave me a spine." He hung up. A week later, Haley called. "He's furious. He thinks you owe him." That was Dad's favorite story, that everything I ever did was built on his foundation. His lessons, his toughness. The truth was, his lessons didn't build me. They broke me, and I'd learned to rebuild myself differently. The next time I saw his name, it was on a list of bidders for a luxury unit in the same tower where I was apartment hunting. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was a challenge. Then Haley called again. He wants you to come see the unit with him. Maybe it's time you talked. I should have said no. Instead, I said, fine. I told myself it was for closure. Deep down, I knew it was something else. A chance to finally stand in front of him and prove I'd made it. I just didn't realize he'd brought the same old script. After the confrontation, after the silent elevator ride and the realtor's nervous tour of my penthouse, I closed the door and the quiet hit me like a wave. The victory I thought I wanted felt hollow. His voice was still in my head, a ghost haunting the marble floors. I'd spent years fighting for his approval, and now that I didn't need it, I felt strangely empty. I buried myself in work, but the news about Bookies Pro spread like wildfire. Within 48 hours, half the internet believed Brandon Hale had invented my platform. His PR team was relentless. Investors got spooked. Tara, my lead investor, called. Nathaniel, public perception matters, she said gently. This kind of scandal, it's toxic. Within a week, we lost 3 major clients. One was Mr. Russo. We just can't afford instability, he said, and I could hear the genuine regret in his voice. I told him I understood. I didn't. My team started to fray. My operations manager resigned, citing health reasons. I knew it was her reputation she was protecting. The pressure was immense. And then, the final blow. My father showed up at my penthouse door one Friday night. He stood there in his tailored coat, his face unreadable. He stepped inside, ignoring the tension. Looks like you're learning what the real world feels like after all. The cold satisfaction in his voice was the last straw. You came here just to say that? I asked, my voice tight. I came to remind you that pride comes before a fall, he said, pacing the living room like a professor. You built this on a lucky break, not a foundation. You thought a fancy address made you invincible. But the minute real pressure hits, the house of cards always falls. Stop, I said quietly. He didn't. You embarrassed yourself, and frankly, you've embarrassed this family. That word, family, snapped something inside me. I slammed my hand on the kitchen counter. The sound echoed in the cavernous room. Family? You cut me off. You mocked me. You made sure everyone knew I was the failure. You don't get to use that word now. His jaw tightened, a flicker of surprise in his eyes. I only ever wanted you to be realistic. No, Dad, I said, stepping closer, my voice shaking with years of suppressed anger. You wanted me to be small, because my dreams were a language you didn't understand, and it scared you. He turned toward the door, his composure regained. Good luck, Nathaniel, he said, his voice flat and final. You're going to need it. When the door clicked shut, I sank to the floor, the skyline a blur of indifferent lights. He was wrong about me, but in that moment, I felt exactly like the failure he always said I was. For 3 days, I didn't leave the apartment. I ignored the calls, the texts, the urgent emails. I was done. Then, one night, scrolling through old files, I found a message from Lydia, dated 2 years ago. It was a photo of her and Marco, smiling in front of their shop. You saved our business, Nathaniel. You gave us back time with our kids. Don't stop building. The world needs it. That one line broke something open inside me. I hadn't built LedgerLink to prove my father wrong. I'd built it for them. The next morning, I called Jess. I'm not quitting, I said before she could speak. We're rebuilding. We called it Project Phoenix. We rebuilt LedgerLink from the ground up, stronger, smarter, and with an encryption so tight it was virtually uncrackable. We worked in secret, fueled by pizza and a shared sense of purpose. We launched a quiet beta, inviting back the clients who had believed in me from the start. Word spread. Customers who'd switched to Bookies started returning, complaining that Brandon's system was a buggy, unreliable mess. Behind the scenes, I was preparing for war. My lawyer had everything. Time-stamped code, copyright registration, and a sworn statement from a remorseful Jess, detailing everything. The first time I saw Brandon again was at a major tech conference downtown. He was on stage, basking in the spotlight, boasting about his innovation. I waited until the applause died down. Then I stood up. "Excuse me," I said, my voice carrying across the silent hall. "A quick question for Mr. Hale." Every head turned. Brandon froze, forcing a smile. "Nathaniel Black," he said, pretending warmth. "Everyone. Meet the man who inspired me." The crowd chuckled. I didn't. I walked to the center aisle. Inspired me? That's one word for it. I connected my tablet to the main projector. On the screen, 2 blocks of code appeared side by side. One from my original LedgerLink prototype, dated 4 years ago. The other from Bookies Pro. They were identical down to my personal comments in the code. The room went dead silent. "This," I said, my voice ringing with clarity, "isn't inspiration. It's theft. My company has verified repositories and legal ownership of every line you stole." Brandon's face drained of color. "That's ridiculous." "Really?" I interrupted. "Because Jess, the developer you paid to leak this code, just signed a sworn statement confirming everything. She provided the original server logs." Murmurs erupted. Phones came out, their screens lighting up the dim room. Security escorted a sputtering Brandon offstage. That night, every major outlet ran the story. He vanished from the industry within a week. The fallout was immediate. My inbox flooded with apologies and partnership offers. But this time I ignored the noise. I just breathed. A week later, there was a knock on my door. It was my father. He looked older, smaller, holding a newspaper folded to the headline with my name. "I read it 3 times, he said softly. I didn't believe it. He stepped inside, his eyes scanning the apartment. "You know," he said, his voice cracking slightly, "I only ever understood one way to win my way. I never believed another path was possible. You didn't just build a company, Nathaniel. You proved my entire philosophy wrong." It was the closest he would ever come to saying he was sorry, and it was more than enough. "I wasn't angry at your success," he continued, looking out at the skyline. "I was scared. Scared you'd prove I was wrong about you, and maybe about myself." Haley arrived later carrying coffee. She hugged me. A real hug, fierce and long. "I'm so proud of you, Nate," she whispered. "You deserve all of this." We stood by the window together, the city glowing beneath us. For the first time, it didn't feel like a prize I had won, but a home I had built. I watched their reflections in the glass, not with bitterness, but with a quiet sense of peace. The sweetest revenge, I realized, isn't proving them wrong. It's living so fully, so completely on your own terms, that their doubt becomes irrelevant. It's not about silencing the critics. It's about finally hearing your own voice above all others.